I was timid at school, but Ampe was that one place where I could be loud and no one could tell me anything.
Who would fund a thing like this?
You know, doing 2-1-2, 2-2-4.
Yeah. Was that the expectation going into that sort of production?
Ampe is one of the first places that Ghanaian girls just have to themselves. Reading something is entirely different than watching it on screen.
And what were some of the most memorable moments in the making of that?
Yeah. It's like, Lord, you don't even need to open a door, just open a window.
Open it halfway. Well, hello there. My name is Emma Ofosua. Welcome to the All African Women Poetry Festival podcast. And my guest for today is the amazing filmmaker, writer extraordinaire, Claudia Owusu. I'm happy to have you here, Claudia. Claudia is coming all the way from the USA, but she's Ghanaian. And so we're really happy to have you on our couch today. How are you feeling? How are you doing?
I'm feeling good. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Great. Today we've been having fun. Playing Ampe, trying to figure out which leg matches with which leg, the basic rhythm to it, and learning about the fact that it's almost similar to 10-10.
Yeah.
And just the conversation it gets to generate. And I think I just want you to take us a little back into where did the thought for wanting to step into filmmaking, but also to focus the story, the narrative on Black girlhood, on girlhood growing up, and even focusing it on a game played in a Ghanaian context. Walk us through that journey and what brought you to that point of starting.
Yeah, I'd say that as a writer, I'm really interested in memory, and I'm interested in community and what it means to create a communal archive. And so as, you know, growing in poetry and growing in nonfiction, soon film felt like a medium that would be accessible to a lot of different audiences, because reading something is entirely different than watching it on screen. And as far as the theme of Black girlhood goes, I think I've always had such a solid group of friends around me, and I think, you know, friendships with other women have been really formative for me in my life. And so naturally, I felt really moved to not only reflect my own experiences, but that of the friends that I grew up with. And so increasingly, as we're growing and as, you know, facing all these transitions, it just became important to create a space within storytelling where we will always be young and we will always be youthful and we will always be free to kind of take up space and explore and do whatever we feel, with just a sense of carefreeness and abandonment. And so I think that's kind of how, over the years, especially with collaborating with my co-director, Ife Oluwamuide, on the documentary, it just became almost a necessity to create a space of archive for ourselves on screen. Right. You talk about collaboration, but even before we jump into the conversation of collaboration and how that formation came about, what for you is the cultural significance of focusing on the game Ampe, and what were some of the most memorable moments in the making of that? Yeah, I think honestly that Ampe is one of the first places that Ghanaian girls just have to themselves. It's a place that we, you know, define the rules, we invite or disinvite, we construct the space. It is all sort of under our authority, and nobody can take that away from us. Yeah. And so because of that, it was important. The idea came to us in 2020 while we were playing Ampe with a group of friends. And so it was really cool to see all these otherwise reserved Ghanaian girls get really wild and, you know, open and crazy and get up in each other's faces. And so it became about, what does it mean, you know, that we are no longer these girls that we used to be, and what does it mean that we still invite this chapter of our lives along even as we move through life. And so just through that reflection and through that desire, I think just the film and the necessity of it came to the forefront, especially as we talked to other Ghanaian girls that we knew and even other Black girls across the diaspora. And we all just felt this sense of grief a little bit that something had been taken from us, or we had been pushed out of a chapter of our lives too soon before we could really cherish it. And so I think now we're kind of doing the corrective work of like looking back and cherishing it properly.
Right. Yeah. Adulthood did happen.
Yeah. Way too fast.
Before we could get rid of it, it just just took us out of that. But
Yeah.
when you look at the film, you do, and we'll just touch a bit on the film and then come to you as a person, as an artist. But it does touch on themes of safety, of security, of creativity and connection. You find fearlessness and bravery being birthed because people who otherwise are very reserved tend to be almost outspoken just by participating in that activity. Was that the expectation going into that sort of production, or how did you navigate those experiences coming up? Was that an after experience, or did that precede the production of it? Walk me through that.
Yeah, I think from the top, our driving question was, okay, what does it mean that Ampe is a coming of age ritual for Ghanaian girls? And then I think with time, we knew that with each girl that we spoke to, that idea of coming of age would look different for each person. And so for one person, coming of age meant the fact that they snuck out of their house to go and play Ampe. For another, it meant the fact that, you know, they grew up in a house full of cousins and their girl cousins taught them how to play Ampe. For another, coming of age meant that that's how they practiced their math in class or in school on the playground, you know, doing 2 1 2 2 2 full, and that's kind of how they kept up with it. And so for another, it was, you know, I was timid at school, but Ampe was that one place where I could be loud and no one could tell me anything. And so I think really we had our ideas that, okay, Ampe is a coming of age ritual, but sort of the nuance and the levels of what it meant or the impact that it had on each girl that we interviewed, we knew that it would be different for each person.
For something like that, most people would be wondering who would fund a thing like this. Like who would fund a plaything? But you were able to happen on the Big Ideas grant. What did that mean to the work, especially with the challenges you had to face in that production process with you and your co-collaborator on this?
Yeah, I think we knew that we cared about the idea. And so even before we had gotten any funding or won any grants, we immediately, you know, put our money forth, and so invested our money in pre-production and just, you know, purchase tickets, etc. Just these things that really allowed us to take that chance. And then we received a lot of rejections when it came to grant applications. But I will say that the Big Ideas grant in Columbus, Ohio, was one of the first grants that we received that really felt like an affirmation that we should keep going. And then much later, even our second grant that we got that really shifted the culture of how we shot the film came post Ghana, right? Like after we had already shot in Ghana. And so it was really a lot of, regardless of if the help comes or not, we're doing this anyway. And so all the while we were in August of 2021, we were shooting in Accra, and we had just done a pitch video for a grant. And we were just praying that, Lord God, you don't even need to,
we're not asking for so much.
Yeah, I was like, Lord, you don't even need to open a door, just open a window.
Open it halfway.
And we will climb through. And so oddly enough, on our second day of shooting was when I just felt led to check my spam in my email box. And then when I checked, there was an announcement that we had gotten the grant. And even in that, if it was, thank you. Yeah, that was literally the hand of God. But it really was an opportunity for us to refund ourselves for everything that we had already invested. And so I think the grants were really helpful, but I really do believe that we were going to do it regardless. Yeah.
Right. You talked a bit about, I see your faith come through in how you even communicate, overcoming and navigating challenges and all. What was it, or what is it like having to be a person of faith in the world of filmmaking, and even as a writer, really?
Yeah, I'd say that there are a lot of difficulties, but I do really believe in my heart that so much of my writing, or so much of the way that I see the world, is really just, I guess, a runoff of who God is, like God's majesty. And his heart for people, his heart for his creation. And so part of me being able to create, or me being able to think about film, or even writing, or, you know, the way that I use language, I'm just really borrowing from who God is. And then I'd also say that a lot of the times when it comes to maybe even difficulties in filmmaking, when it comes to, okay, how can this narrative take shape? Or what is this story really trying to say? Like I've had moments where, you know, I've prayed about it and gone to sleep, and then in the dream, there is like a clearer vision of like how things are supposed to go. And so I'd say that a lot of it is really me just borrowing from who God is. And then secondly, too, just really inviting God into the process of either brainstorming, creating, etc. Yeah.
God then happens to be a key member of your community.
Yeah.
But what has, I think, community meant to your creative process, and how have you had to lean into that? And I'm sure you have a lot of that to say, even in regards to the creation of this project. So just a bit of a touch on that.
Yeah, I think my community means everything to me. Like even in the midst of the shifts and the changes, you know, all throughout our pre-production of Ampe, we had a community of, you know, people that we loved and respect, who gave us feedback and gave us questions to think about in order to make the film better. I'd also say that, you know, the majority of the cast in the film are good friends of ours that we casted, who literally dedicated their days and months to the film, even though they didn't even have to. And it's just like, it blows my mind. And then even with our fundraising, again, our community fundraising, our community really came through with just, you know, giving us their investment and their time and attention when we shared about the film with them. And so it's always been about community for us. And even whenever we go to screenings and we talk to people, we're here, you know, present, but also getting new stories of how people are engaging with the film. And so community on the front end, community on the back end, community all around. Yeah, we're really held up by our community.
That sounds like a rhyme was forming, like a playtime rhyme was forming right in there. So we should work on that and birth that piece. No, but pretty much, what stories should we be looking forward to you telling? What stories are nudging or tugging at your heart right now? And how do you hope that your filmmaking career and journey evolves over time?
Yeah, I think right now I'm still very much on the train of girlhood, but now thinking more also about womanhood, namely the women in my family, the women who raised me, both, you know, in media, like Ghanaian media, and then also personally in the house that I grew up in. And so those are the stories that I'm exploring in new genres, like in poetry and in nonfiction. And so I guess less film as of right now, but more like writing on the page. So yeah.
Fantastic, fantastic. Okay, we'll do something we haven't done in this season, a rapid round of questions. So pretty much a question and then you answer with one answer, like one word answers to that. We'll probably do three if it all comes to mind. And so to you, girlhood is?
Space.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Creativity is?
Love.
Fantastic. And building community means
pouring.
Great. And so it's space, love, and pouring with Claudia Owusu on today's podcast. Any final things you'd love to share? Any final thoughts you'd want to leave?
I'm just grateful to be here. So thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. This has been amazing, having this beautiful conversation with Claudia Owusu, the filmmaker and writer, co-producer for Ampe, Leap Into the Sky, Black Girl. And you can find that, we'll link the platforms where you can find that in the caption below. This has been the All African Women Poetry Festival podcast. And my name remains Emma Ofosua. It's been great coming your way. Do stick and stay. See you soon.
Tapon, actually in Fanti, means a paddle. So when I saw the name, I was really fascinated, because it's time also to use our language and symbols to represent ourselves.